All right, good morning, everyone. I imagine everyone heard that we are recording this meeting. In the interest of time, we are going to get started here, recognizing there are some other folks joining to attend our meeting today. On behalf of the Natural Medicine Division, really happy that you're here. Welcome to our meeting. I will just start us off for the record. Today is Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023. It is 10:01 a.m. My name is Dominique Mendiola. I serve as the Senior Director for the Colorado Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division. Today, we are hosting our 5th listening session to inform our stand-up of a regulatory framework for natural medicine operations here in Colorado. Today's session starts our conversation about cultivation and manufacturing standards for natural medicine. We want to hear from you, so consider what are the most critical subjects we need to address in our regulations for cultivation and manufacturing. We're going to begin our official rulemaking in 2024, and that also provides opportunities for stakeholder engagement. That's just in a more formal format. This is all in anticipation of our needing to be ready to accept applications for licenses for natural medicine operations by December 31st of 2024. I am joined by my
Hey, Dominique, you just went on mute.
Thank you for catching that. Appreciate that. Okay, let me just jump in. And I don't know, I introduced you, Allison. I'm going to just go back to that for our record. And for folks who are off mute, if you can go on mute, just so that we're not hearing feedback, that would be great. Thanks for the catch, Allison. Okay, again, I'm joined by my co-chair, Allison Robinette, who serves as our Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for the division. Also joined by our colleagues with the Department of Regulatory Agencies, and that includes Sam Barami. Sam is a senior advisor on natural medicine services and has worked really closely with the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. We also have advisory board member, Dr. Sofia Chavez, in attendance today on behalf of the board. Thank you for being here. And joining us from the Colorado Department of Law, we have Ross Hugerheide, Christy DeMaria, and Paige Olson, who represent the Natural Medicine Division. We will be scheduling additional listening sessions in the coming months, so stay tuned for updates on that. And if you are not signed up to receive updates from the Natural Medicine Division, we encourage you to sign up for those updates. We'll include information links in the chat for your access. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Allison, to take us through some logistics for our participation today.
Thanks, Dominique, and good morning, everyone. So for today, we have disabled the chat function. You can chat to me as the host, but that's really so we can focus on our discussion. And when we open up the floor for discussion, we ask that you come off mute and introduce yourself, including your name and any organization that you're representing. If you're joining our meeting today by the phone, you can raise and lower your hand by dialing *9, and you can mute and unmute by dialing *6. So when we get to the discussion point, we'll ask folks to raise their hands. We'll be monitoring the queue to make sure that we're reserving enough time for anyone who wants to make comments to do so. And while there is no limit to the number of comments you can make, we just ask that you be mindful of your time and try to limit each comment to about 2 minutes so that we can make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak today.
Great, thank you, Allison. So I'm going to take us through just an overview of the Department of Revenue's role in this regulatory program. So under proposition, this is all reflected in, under Proposition 122 and now Senate Bill 290, there are essentially 3 aspects to changes in the law. First, on personal use. The law allows the personal use of natural medicines, including allowances for personal cultivation and possession. For personal cultivation, adults can cultivate natural medicine on private property, which is defined in statute. That area must be enclosed and locked and cannot exceed 12 by 12 feet. For personal possession and use, there is no personal possession limit currently established in the law. Also, adults are allowed to share with other adults, so all over the age of 21, for reasons that are listed in statute. For example, within the context of spiritual guidance and community-based use. There are also restrictions or prohibitions on personal use established under state law. For example, When sharing, you cannot accept payment for natural medicine. This is not a commercial program, and you will not see dispensaries for natural medicine like we have for cannabis in Colorado. So second, as it relates to the regulatory program for natural medicine, the law directs the Department of Regulatory Agencies, so that's DORA, our colleagues at DORA, to license and regulate facilitators, persons who are approved by the state to administer natural medicine to adults in a regulated environment. And third, the law directs the Department of Revenue, so our agency, DOR, to license and regulate healing centers, cultivations, manufacturers, and laboratory testing facilities, and that's in coordination with our partners at the Public Health Department. We have other assigned responsibilities as well that touch on data collection and reporting, and the development of public education and first responder training materials, just to name a few. So in previous sessions, we provided more background and detail about the department's responsibilities under the Natural Medicine Code. Those meetings are all recorded and available on our division website. So just know that that information is available to you along with the meeting materials like our agenda and slide decks and other resources, including a summary of Senate Bill 290 we developed to support our implementation work. Allison is going to take us through a quick summary of our listening sessions to date to inform and help frame this conversation. Then we'll jump into statutory requirements that we'll focus on in today's meeting.
Thanks, Dominique. So we've had 4 listening sessions leading up to today. And just quickly, I'll walk through our first session, which was on September 5th. We covered sort of an overview of Senate Bill 290 and introducing the Natural Medicine Division here at DOR. This focused on a high-level overview of the program, touching on both the regulatory program and personal use provisions. And we want to continue to support efforts to increase awareness about these new broad changes in Colorado laws. So we'll be exploring additional ways to do that through these sessions. Our second session focused on first responder training, and this relates to DOR's obligation to develop training materials for first and multi-responders. We recognize there would likely be a strong focus on certain areas like training materials for local law enforcement and EMS response. However, we also learned that through these sessions, there are other areas we should be focusing on. And so we'll be taking some time to digest that information to help inform future conversations. In our third session, we focused on public education campaigns that DOR is responsible for developing. We are starting to think about different resources for different groups of people, for example, including pharmacists in this conversation. And as one attendee put it, pulling in those legacy experts to help inform educational information we are putting out to the public. Another key takeaway from this meeting was our need to continue to keep in mind the historical and traditional use of these medicines. And as an attendee also highlighted, there could be a greater focus on that through educational materials. In our testing program session, which was the one we held last week, we were really looking for information and feedback on initial questions about the testing program that DOR will implement in close coordination with the Department of Public Health and Environment. Our attendees at this session provided some really interesting perspectives on, for example, shelf stability of psilocybin and psilocin and what they're seeing regarding heavy metal test results and potential future needs for residual solvent testing. We also heard from attendees the need to focus on reliability, consistency, and reproducibility in how we approach setting these testing standards. And as Dominique said, all of the recordings and materials are available on our website. And I'll also share a link to a public folder where we have all of those materials as well for easy access.
Great, thank you, Allison. So I'm going to, before we get into our discussion questions and then open things up to hear from all of you, just want to touch on an overview of relevant statutory requirements for today's meeting. The new Colorado Natural Medicine Code can be found in Title 44 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, and that's under Article 50. As a part of the General Assembly's directive to establish a regulated framework for natural medicine, we need to develop rules for licensed cultivation and manufacturing activities. So this includes rules on the following subjects. So requirements and restrictions on different types of regulated natural medicine products, individual serving and per package serving amounts, We understand there's a focus on microdosing, for example. So how do we approach defining that? Licensed premises requirements, including security requirements and storage, record keeping, health and safety standards, think good agricultural or manufacturing standards, sanitary requirements, occupational health standards, where are SOPs expected, recall plans, preventative controls just overall. As well as waste management and disposal requirements. So consider proper storage and disposal of any hazardous chemicals or waste or byproduct. Also consider sustainability measures, best practices on that front. Additionally, transportation requirements is a part of what we expect to touch on in regulations. This is for the transport of natural medicine inventory from one facility to another. This includes manifest requirements, which can help law enforcement easily verify a legal regulatory transport, which can minimize disruption to these legal regulated activities. Other rule subjects we may touch on today, but that we anticipate will require more dedicated time towards in future meetings include inventory tracking requirements, packaging and labeling, including warning labels, and limits on the amount of natural medicine allowed for production. And this is really intended to prevent risks of overproduction and contemplates us establishing metrics that allow us to monitor and measure production and demand. So 290, Senate Bill 290 also includes specific requirements and restrictions applicable to cultivation and manufacturing. And that's in section 402 and 403 of Title 44, Article 50. So natural medicine products, for example, cannot mimic a trademarked food product. So you cannot intentionally or knowingly label or package natural medicine in a manner that would cause reasonable consumer confusion about whether a natural medicine product is a trademarked food product. Also, there are requirements or restrictions related to the location of cultivation and manufacturing facilities, where that location cannot conflict with applicable zoning laws of a local jurisdiction. Also, those locations cannot be located within 1,000 feet of a childcare center, preschool, elementary, middle, junior, or high school, or residential childcare facility. So this is where there are elements that are, generally similar to some of those restrictions you see in cannabis. But just to be clear, there is not a dual licensing framework contemplated here. But there are certain like zoning related restrictions and location distance restrictions. I'm going to hand it over to Allison to take us through our discussion questions, and we're ready to open it up to hear from you all.
Thanks. And so as you all hopefully are accustomed to now, we provided some discussion topics and questions ahead of the meeting. We're going to jump right into that. So today we're interested in hearing from folks about what traditional or historical cultivation practices can serve as a foundation for regulatory guardrails or requirements. What is the average weight of a single flush of psilocybin? And again, as we've said in some of our meetings previously, while natural medicine is defined more broadly for the purposes of initial implementation, we're focusing on psilocybin and psilocin, understanding that other natural medicines may be recommended by the board to be included in the regulatory framework. So if you have comments on other natural medicines, feel free to share those as well. What types of products should be permitted or prohibited within the regulated space? For example, we've heard a lot about different teas, whole cap mushrooms, as well as capsules and things like that. So are there other types of products that should be specifically permitted or prohibited? Do certain product types pose increased safety risks that need to be considered or addressed through regulations? And kind of tied to that, what are the emerging product types that, and should these products types be subject to more stringent or additional requirements in order to be utilized in an administration session happening within the regulated framework? And then the last question we have here is if the department has the authority to limit the number of cultivation and or manufacturing licenses, should it? So those are some pretty big high-level questions that we would love to hear your input on today, and that might help inform future conversations as well. As a reminder, please raise your hand and we will make every effort to go in order that those hands go up. When you come off mute, please introduce yourself and any organization you represent. And if you'd like me to toggle between the discussion question slides, please just let me know. So with that, please go ahead and start raising your hands. Yes, Hank Lesher.
Yeah, thanks so much for this opportunity. I've been waiting for it, so this is really timely. I've got a couple of quick comments. One, when you said, how much psilocybin per flush, that's going to really depend on the capabilities of a producer. And I would actually then weigh that against or ratio that against the amount of substrate to potentially dry weight. That's one comment. The other comment is there's a lot of pressure or there's a lot of direction around either synthesizing or extracting psilocybin. And I would strongly encourage, in terms of natural medicines, to think about natural mushroom products, whether that's ground or other types of edibles. And in part because psilocybin is not the only active ingredient, even though that's what seems to be regulated here. Baeocystin and psilocybin are also really important, particularly in the clinical environment, because those are the compounds that really keep you very centered and keep you very present when you're really sort of out there. And so having a balance and having the awareness that that might be also a marketing tool, and or that clinicians might actually desire to know what those other types of compounds are in the product, is part of a natural therapy, is, I think, going to be incredibly important moving forward. And then we can also talk about species at some point, but I'll keep my comments to that.
Hey, thank you, Hank. And I see other hands up. Thank you for kicking us off with our comments today, Hank. Just want to also share, looking back at the statute, or specifically the bill, Senate Bill 290, it does narrow the scope of how we look at and define natural medicine. And it provides that it does not mean a synthetic or synthetic analog of the substances listed. And that those are the different substances under the definition of natural medicine, including a derivative of a naturally occurring compound of natural medicine that is produced using chemical synthesis, chemical modification, or chemical conversion. So did want to flag that too, as a response to your comments, which we appreciate and to help inform additional discussion. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Jonathan Cherkos.
Hi, Jonathan Cherkos, I don't know, Lab Consulting. I don't see my friend Colton from Altitude, but so one of the things I saw in this that I just wanted to hit on real quick was that the size of the mushrooms, I'm sorry, the size of the flush is I don't want to sound too whatever, but it's a bad measure of how to guess that, because they're doing some studies looking at the size of the mushrooms, and it turns out that potentially, like, the smaller the mushroom, the more potent it is. So it may not be that the psilocybin is produced throughout the life of the mushroom. It may be earlier on, and certain strains make, like, pumpkin sized mushrooms, and some make little kind of clove size almost. So that, I think that would be a really difficult way to measure the psilocybin stuff. And then just on manufacturing and production, just something also to think about. So sonication, so like using ultrasound, is a pretty good method of helping with the extraction process. So that would be kind of a mechanical separation. But it just releases more of the product. Essentially, without that, you would just be throwing away more psilocybin, right? You would just be wasting that afterwards. So that's something to consider. And then another thing is freeze drying as a preservation method. I've seen a bunch of people start using that, and it seems to actually preserve a lot more of the alkaloid content not freezing the product, but freeze drying and removing the moisture content. So just, I don't know, putting that on your radar. That's it.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, helpful, just insights. Appreciate your feedback, and so that we're thinking about what are the range of different like processing methods that maybe don't touch on that like synthesis, like the synthetic process, but really just general processing methods that we should expect folks to want to engage in as a part of any sort of cultivation or manufacturing practices.
Great. Next, we'll go to Samantha Leba.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of go on a little bit off of what he said, but with the different strains, there is different potency, but I would also caution to stick with the natural forms of the mushrooms themselves and how they grow, and all of the uses that they have in whole form. Dehydration is a really good process for storage. And I would say that I do think that you guys should regulate the number of cultivation licenses that you guys have. And I would also say that I think that we should copy Oregon in the fact that the people who apply for licensing must be residents of Colorado for a minimum of 2 years.
Thank you,
That's all
Madam.
I have.
Thank you. I do want to flag, we appreciate your feedback here, but also we have some members of our AG team on who represent the Natural Medicine Division and have seen some trends around, residency requirements, and there, sometimes being challenges around that, legal challenges that we would need to be prepared to navigate. But we want to make sure we're hearing about the perspectives and what, folks would be suggesting so that we can explore all those options. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Gabe Trevino.
Hi, everyone. First of all, pleasure to be here. Very informational session. So something that came to mind as far as a product of psilocybin is chocolate bars. They're more and more prevalent on the market. I don't know if that falls under, synthetic derivative, but, I hear people grow the psilocybin naturally and then bake into chocolate, and it gets all the same pretty packaging that you see in the cannabis market. And shows up in virtual marketplaces, as well as in-person marketplaces. And, then comes the struggle of how do we test it? How do we make sure there are not contaminants in it? And I don't have the answers to any of that, but I just wanted to put that on the radar.
Hey, thank you, Gabe, for that. We do anticipate, interest in natural medicine, edibles. I think we would consider in that category, and, where they could likely be manufactured without that, chemical conversion or modification type process, but would definitely be interested in understanding, what that process entails, so that we're thinking about whether there is a distinction we should be making there.
Thank you. And as a reminder, if you could please, when you introduce yourself, also indicate if you represent an organization, that would be helpful for our record. So we'll go next to Amanda Lynn Moses.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Mandolin. I am the CEO and a founder of a company that is called Blue Magic. And I'm located in Arizona. Basically we are in the process right now of putting together a prototype of basically taking shipping containers and growing mushrooms in they're 90% automated, of where they grow we grow mushrooms, and we also grow regular edible foods. And the container inside of them, we're able to grow plants and mushrooms in any kind of climate around the world, so people have access to it. So I know there was a comment earlier about like residency issues, but there are places around the world that are just they're so slow, like Arizona, like so slow to be able to be able to adopt things like this. And so, like for me, I'm very, I follow the regulations of places all over the world. So people are all, especially right now, all over the country, where people are able to have access to a larger quantity um, of mushrooms. So people actually have access to it and are able to grow it quicker. So people, because one of the biggest things is not having access to product and running out of it. So I think that's one thing to really consider. The other thing is one of my favorite ways to create mushrooms or plants using medicinal plants of all types. And when I say medicinal plants, I believe all plants have a medicinal quality to them, not just like psychedelics, but is extracting them through oils, which makes them a lot more potent. And I find are very much healing for the brain and the nervous system. So, and that is my favorite way of cultivating mushrooms. So that's my comment today, is being able to really have people to have access to these places and to be able to realize if we are going to be pushing for regulation, not just within state lines, but how we're able to, um, you know, people who are more advanced, like Colorado and Oregon and things like that, to be able to get the message out all over the country. Thank you.
Hey, Madeline, thank you for your comment. And I apologize, I may have attributed a different comment from a participant to you. If I did that, I apologize, but appreciate your feedback and do want to clarify, like the law as it was written and the subs after the proposition. So Senate Bill 290 does not contemplate residency, restrictions, requirements. So that's not something we'd see as specifically having even authority to impose, but we do need to consider in, I think, a later session discussion that we'll later announce, but we'll look to have a more deep dive conversation around eligibility requirements for licensing. And also your mention of oils, just curious from all of our participants here, whether that, is, consistent or aligned with what we would call a concentrate type products, and to what extent or do we expect, those types of products being of interest here. Ross, with the AG's office, I saw you had your hand up for a moment there, if you wanted to jump in related to this residency or another subject.
Thank you, Dominique. That was the issue that I wanted to jump in on, and do appreciate it. So I'm Ross Ugerheide with the Colorado AG's office, Department of Law, here representing only the Natural Medicine Division, who you've heard a lot from, both Dominique and Allison, our clients. Just wanted to caution this group that a residency requirement is not something that we see that could be put in through a rule. That would be a statutory or a constitutional requirement were that to be included, and do have some pretty significant concerns based on challenges that we have been following around the country, more in the cannabis space and also in the alcohol space, of challenges to residency requirements. And so I just didn't want this group to be too distracted on that residency piece, because I really think that is not really a topic for today, and really would need to be a legislative change, not a rule change. And appreciate the opportunity to speak on that issue, Dominique. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross.
Great. Next, we'll go to Noah. Noah, if you could maybe try muting and unmuting again, you're breaking up pretty bad, and it still shows that you're muted on my side at least. Noah, we still cannot hear you, so we will come back to you, okay? Next, we'll go to Patrick.
Hi, Patrick Halpin here. I currently work in the cannabis industry for a company called Cannabis Transport Services. Something I did want to mention here that I think is quite important is I believe there should be some way of communicating to law enforcement what transfers are actually legal transfers. Something I still have seen as an issue today, a decade after we've seen the implementation of transfer manifests within the cannabis industry, is that law enforcement officers simply just don't know what to do with manifests. They don't know what it is. They don't know how to recognize and see if it is something that is legal and verified. We have some officers are like, oh yeah, I've seen that before, totally know what it is, totally good. We've got some officers who are like, empty the vehicle, we want to see every single thing that's in the vehicle, but yet they still don't actually know what it is that they're looking at. So I would recommend for this, we're most likely going to see less transfers going on because this is not going to be a retail industry. There's going to be less licensed locations that it's going to be going to. And so because of that, if there's some way that we can work with law enforcement to give them maybe a digital version of something where they can actually go and verify if something is a legalized transfer, I would highly recommend implementing something like that. That can be implemented along with trainings to those officers. That's all that I have to say there. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Hey, thank you, Patrick, for your comment and just for reflecting on your experience in cannabis and how we can look to take any lessons learned from that to inform how we approach this. And we are also responsible for developing training materials for law enforcement, other first responders. So that's just a great flag for us to be focused in on that part of this process, and also thinking through just overall, what does the process look like so that we can ensure that there is a way, a method for law enforcement to more easily verify that these transfers are legal, regulated transfers.
Okay, we'll go next to Erica Messenger.
Hi, Monique and Allison. Thanks for having me on again today. My name is Erica Messenger. I'm a registered nurse. I'm also the cultivator at Diam Mushrooms. So I know you were looking for particular, and I know we've talked about this a little bit about the amount in the flush, and there are a lot of factors to consider there. We can look to, because these are typically manure-based substrates is what the psilocybin is grown on. So we would look to something like I'm sorry, the mushroom I'm trying to think of, the button mushroom is also grown on manure-based substrates. So we would look to those kind of commercial practices to probably see about flushes. But as far as the lower end, I just calculated my last 15 bins, and I got around 9,800 fresh grams, which is about 980 dried grams. That was in an average space of so for those last 15 bins, that averaged about 613 fresh grams. And that was for each one of those, that was in a space of roughly about 630 square inches. So if you're looking at a cultivation space privately, 12 by 12, but as far as commercially, I don't know how large that space is going to be. But I would say that would be the low end, and those are for strains that are average potency. They're also average size. So that might be some sort of number to start with. But again, I would think that would be the low end as we kind of get better with our cultivation practices.
Thank you, Erica. I appreciate that. And it's helpful just to be thinking about sort of what we can expect, on average, to be produced at any given point. But what are we basing that on? How do we measure what a batch could look like, and how that informs even the number of samples that you take for testing purposes. So a lot of just additional things that we'll need to be thinking about as we consider just the process overall for cultivation.
Absolutely. And whether or not you're taking the product fresh versus dried, I'm assuming mostly it's going to be dried, but you can guess about 1/10 of whatever your fresh harvest is going to be your dried harvest. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Erica. All right, I see Noah, so we'll go back to Noah and then we'll go to you, Charles.
Hi, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Noah Novello. I represent Friday Ventures. I do consulting and analytical testing on potency and microbials. And I wanted to talk about some of the different products that are out there that I've been testing the most, and what I've been seeing besides the raw fruit capsules that contain the powderized mushroom, either by itself or in addition with other functional mushroom ingredients or ingredients like niacin and lion's mane. Also pressed pills and tablets, chocolate bars and gummies are the most popular kind of edibles that we've been seeing out there, as well as tinctures and tea. So I just wanted to just put some information out there about teas and products like that. They can be psilocybin and psilocin can be extracted into a liquid and put into beverages, but depending on the process and temperatures used and whether or not there's preservatives, that potency can rapidly degrade. I know with over a decade of experience in the cannabis industry, I know the compliance testing process sometimes can take at least a week. And in that amount of time, the potency of water-based psilocybin products can diminish by half or 100%. So it's just important to know that the stability of some of these products is not at all like cannabis, and they can very much degrade into absolutely nothing that's psychoactive within a few hours, within a few days or weeks, depending on the process and the temperatures and the other ingredients in the product. Let's see, I also wanted to mention something about the synthetic. I know right now the rules are set up to prohibit that sort of product, but just wanted to throw it out there that there are hundreds of compounds in the mushroom that may intensify or even diminish the effects. And so a synthetic version of psilocin is a way to utilize that drug without having any other substance in there that may also be contributing to the effects. My last comment is kind of further down the road about DMT and the manufacturing process and the products that are allowed there. Currently, the rules are set up really kind of prohibiting the manufacturing of the extract of NN-DMT, which is the psychoactive compound that's in the ayahuasca. And for ayahuasca to work, it has to be combined with another plant that is an MAOI. And MAOI can be a very dangerous substance for individuals medically. It can have interactions with other medications and other food. And the extract of NN-DMT does not require an MAOI to be active. So I consider that a much safer alternative when we're talking about DMT products. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. It's also the trip is a lot shorter in duration. It's about 30 minutes compared to ayahuasca, which is many hours, sometimes 5 to 8 hours, if not more. So that can be very trying, especially if it has to take place in a psychedelic healing center. So to be able to be with someone for 8 hours and then a couple hours maybe before or after to make sure that everything is good, comparing to a vaporized NN-DMT experience, which all the effects are pretty much gone within 1 hour. So just wanted to put that information out there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing that. And if you have studies or articles or other information related to what you're talking about with the MAOI, potential effects, as well as with NMDMT, that would be really helpful for our teams to start reviewing and trying to get up to speed on where the science is at with these issues.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Please, you can send those directly to me. Okay,
Okay.
we'll go to Charles next.
Thank you. My name is Charles Bogenberger, and I apologize. Noah kind of stole some of my thunder. So I'd like to echo his comments about shelf life. So this is a very different substance than what you're dealing with in the cannabis industry. Cannabis might be shelf stable for like 6 months, maybe even a year, if stored under the right conditions. Psilocybin seems to degrade much quicker than that. And as a result of that, it's really important that you're testing as close to the administration of the psychedelic medicine as possible. The other thing to factor in is that these medicines, as you process them, they also degrade. So it's really important to be testing, as he mentioned, in the case of a tea, that you're testing the final product for its potency. So that way you're labeling it and giving the guides or counselors as much accurate information as possible. The other thing that I wanted to address was the concept of what is the economic model? I know this is not intended to be commercializable at a retail setting, but what is the economic model for how a cultivation center would interact with a treatment facility?
Hey, thank you, Charles, for your comments and for the question around just how we approach, what it looks like economically, model-wise for these entities, for these operations. And that's something that I think will be helpful to informing when we get more into the details of like the licensing process and expectations there, and then how that leads into operations. That's just a good flag for us to be considering what sort of questions we're raising and what information are we bringing to the table in a later discussion focused more on that point.
Thank you. Because I guess my follow-up to that is the intention that if you were going to be a healing center, that you would also have to do your own cultivation, or is there going to be an opportunity for dedicated production facilities to work with multiple healing centers?
No, great. I appreciate that clarification. And we do, just at a high level, knowing that we'll dive more into these details in a later session, but at a high level, in looking at Senate Bill 290, it doesn't specifically contemplate the expectation that somebody who has a healing center is also, needing to operate a cultivation or manufacturing facility, that there could be an independently operated cultivation or an independently operated cultivation and manufacturing facility. And so those are the sort of things that we want to be diving more into to understand where there's interest in different types of operations. Where do we expect an interest in somebody operating, all three of those together, or also as a facilitator with DORA, who's licensed by DORA, wanting to operate a healing center, but may also want to operate and manage their own cultivation and manufacturing processes. Like, those are options that we see as open options for folks to engage in. And so look forward to having more detailed conversations around what the licensing process for that looks like, how that informs licensing fees, so that we're really managing that in a way that's not, disincentivizing participation if folks do want to be a part of the regulatory program.
Thank you.
We will go next to Jonathan Turkos.
Hi, sorry, I'm back. Someone had spoken about the manure-based stuff as far as growing mushrooms. Manure is great for a lot of mushrooms, but cocoa coir, some other stuff works just as well. Oregon does not allow manure. I think that's probably misguided, considering like how you have to sterilize, pasteurize, kind of the whole process would render it kind of inert, almost inert. So manure, I don't think manure should be outright banned, as long as it's not in statute, which I don't remember right off the top of my head. But there's a lot of other kind of viable options. And then just echoing again with Noah, on the well, I don't know exactly if you touched on the water-based stuff, but so like tea and things like that, I think would be, other than at the time of administration, would be very difficult to store and keep any of that psilocin, because it would all be psilocin at that point. And that psilocin degrades rapidly. And so it would be, if any storage of that would pretty much not be good. That's it.
I'm so sorry. If I could jump in on what Jonathan's saying, I agree with what he's saying, and I can see how my comments would be understood that way. I don't endorse manure-based substrate until we understand if it's really more effective than just using cocoa and vermiculite, because those are perfectly acceptable options, but we don't know until we test the potency and how that affects those different substrates affect. But those are historically manure-based substrates versus a wood-based substrate. So thanks for pointing that out, Jonathan. That's an important distinction.
Problem.
Hey, thanks. I think we have John next, but before, I also just wanted to share, somebody who had to jump off, who had their hand up earlier, shared a comment directly with me that I just want to share with the group for awareness and to inform our conversation here and ongoing, is a mention of needing to ensure steps around mold. One of the primary health issues with mycelium never reaches end users. This comes down to the inoculation, drying, and storage processes of the cultivators and transporters. Didn't have a solution, but oversight and audits come to mind. So just wanted to put it out there. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go next to Johnny Bigley.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Johnny Bigley, don't represent any specific organization. My question is around, I know the Department of Revenue is going to start accepting license applications at the end of December 2024. Are there any plans to provide maybe some draft guidance or early guidance for facilities and facility locations and security requirements for people that do plan to set up a cultivation or manufacturing facility to get a head start so that they can be ready for the licensing process when that time does come?
Yes, thanks, Johnny, for this question, and a really good one. So we are intending to initiate our rulemaking process, which will set in place all of the regulatory requirements to obtain a license and to conduct operations compliantly after licenses are obtained. So we're starting that process in the beginning of 2024, where our goal is to have our final regulations in place and effective by the beginning of October 2024. So not only will we be releasing our draft proposed requirements well in advance of that date throughout the year, but they will be effective and final ideally by October 1st, and giving folks quite a bit of a runway to prepare for submitting applications in December.
Hey, thanks, Allison, for touching on that, and Johnny for your question on this front. And as Allison mentioned, the rulemaking process where anyone interested in being a part of the regulated program will have that line of sight to what those regulations will look like prior to adoption. But also we will be thinking about how do we couple that in that rulemaking process with other educational resources for prospective licensees, so that we can work together and understand how best we can set folks up for success and compliance from day one. So appreciate your question and how that suggests some areas that we can be focusing on initiatives.
Thank you very much for the very thorough answer.
Next, we'll go to Samantha.
Hi, I'm back. Samantha Leva. Just myself. I didn't introduce myself last time. Sorry. So I was just going to touch on there are bags also for cultivation that can help eliminate mold just for personal growth and use. And you harvest about 2.5 pounds of mushrooms that are fresh, which yields about 30 grams when they're dehydrated. And they have different substrates too, just to touch on that side of it.
Thank you. We'll go back to Noah.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment on the manure conversation. There are certainly dung-loving strains of mushrooms that really do better using manure-based substrate. And I think it's a lot more important to focus on the end testing for microbials and the safety protocols that are taken for the cultivators and making sure that they're protected from any type of growing method. We've done microbial tests on sterilized manure, and it came back cleaner than some of the chocolate bars that we've been testing. So safe practices and following basic food safety regulations, I think is a lot more important, and getting people educated about how to, protect themselves, either from physical particulates from substrate that could be in the air, or any microbials that could exist. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Noah. Yeah, that's just a good flag for us to be thinking about how we, how does our work get further informed by what we see our partners at the public health department doing, where they regulate, the manufacture of food products. Where can we leverage some of that experience and expectations for their state manufactured foods program? So not wanting to recreate the wheel where we don't need to. Thank you.
We'll go next to Rachel Arnoy.
Hi, good morning. Rachel Ardenoy from RZA Legal. A lot of us are coming from cannabis regulatory, and so I think this is such a great opportunity for us to sort of see where we need to diverge from cannabis. And I think it's been really helpful hearing some of the comments here. Some of it's way higher than my pay grade as far as the science on it. But I think one thing to point out that I think we should really take a look at that should be different than how we do cannabis is maybe allowing for products that are sort of separated that then can be changed. So like I'm only thinking of cannabis brownies, right? You can't sell a brownie kit that has marijuana plus the food items and then put it together. But maybe that is something, because of the degradation in testing, because of the time between getting a product tested, packaged for use, and then finally on a shelf at a healing center, and then when it gets through the wait list of people to get there. And another thing, so maybe, that is something to consider. Maybe it's not a situation where we have manufacturers making tea, but manufacturers making tea bags that can then be further developed by the healing center before administration. So I think that maybe that's something we should look at that's different than cannabis, is in light of the differences of the product that we're talking about here, that maybe it be, some different, sort of all the different modalities that are involved. And then additionally, this kind of came later in the game on cannabis products, but expiration dates, especially in light of the very short shelf life that we're seeing here, that maybe, our initial regulations discuss that those expiration date requirements and maybe limiting batch sizes as a result of that potential degradation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll go to Peter Pryor.
Hey, my name is Pete Pryor. I am a doctor in the cannabis field. I've been doing it for quite some time and interested in psilocybin, have been for some time. And just looking for a little point of clarification. If one were to get into, try to become a therapy center, would that same person or group be able to have a cultivation license as well? If I remember right, it was limited to 5, but I've also heard other people saying that you can only have 1 license. Can I just get a little clarification on that?
Hey, we can, thank you, Dr. Pryor. We can look back at the specific provision that I know I appreciate you flagging, because there is a provision in the law on, that reflects the number 5 on limitations with the number of entity types that a facilitator can operate, but we want to make sure we have that language precise. But I do want to at least clarify generally that there is no specific prohibition on, say, somebody wanting to operate a healing center as well as operate a cultivation and manufacturing facility. So that would be allowed. But there are some limitations on the number of licenses that one can operate. So we can take a look at that and maybe circle back as we hear from other folks.
To build on that, because you mentioned working in the cannabis space, there are also restrictions in the bill about having a natural medicine facility license and a cannabis facility license at the same location. So that is also something to keep in mind.
Thanks. And okay, I did locate that, and it does provide, the Senate Bill 290 provides that a facilitator may not have a financial interest in more than 5 natural medicine business licenses. So you can't have a financial interest in more than 5 natural medicine licenses under the code.
Okay, we are getting close to time, so we will go back to Mandolin, and then we will look to start wrapping up.
Yeah, I have 2 comments. So again, with our business, as you know, like somebody's able to invest in let's just say one of our mushroom farms, you know, they're mobile farms that you can, you know, they're mobile because they're out of shipping containers. So as far as like licensing would go, like if, you know, our lab and where we cultivate it is out in California, but let's just say somebody out in Colorado, like a wellness facility, is able to purchase, you know, their own farm that's got the mushroom grow, whatever it is, species of mushrooms that they want to grow inside of the container, what that licensing would look like. And then Rachel, I believe, I just wanted to piggyback off of what she was saying, because as I'm listening to the conversation, like I said, I work with a bunch of different plants, like, you know, turmeric and ginger and different plants, and put them into teas. And I really like, because I was thinking of the same thing, having the tea and then the powder breakdown of the different mushrooms, and then you could add it to it so it's not sitting in there. And that was something that I would have been contemplating over the last month. So this conversation has helped me got some clarity on that. So I just want to thank everybody for all their comments. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that to the table of what that would look like as far as licensing, if somebody were to actually purchase one of our farms and bring it into Colorado for a wellness center, which is where my passion is why we created this company in the first place.
Hey, thanks, Mandolin, for that. We do anticipate just expectations around, you know, and I think there are still open questions around how we are expecting folks to source natural medicine initially for operations, but that those operations would need to be, you know, located and operational in the state of Colorado. So more work that we need to do around how we expect the licensing process to work, addressing licensing related questions and sourcing questions. So thanks for your input, and we'll keep thinking about that and look forward to more conversation on that front.
Kenya Mitchell.
Thank you so much. I have concerns about whether there will be guardrails put in place for smaller cultivators. So for example, I hope to cultivate for some facilitators that I know, but I run a very small operation. The facilitators that I plan to work with would probably put in requests for specific strains based on their clientele that I would then grow. But it seems to me that in cannabis previously, there was this all or nothing sort of approach to licensing for cultivation. Either it was a larger farm or small at-home growers who can't sell. So I'm wondering if there is going to be a middle road when it comes to licensing for cultivators.
Thanks, Kenya. That's a great flag for us to lead into one of our future listening sessions on licensing and how we might need to be considering distinctions around compliance and, you know, other expectations based on sizes of businesses, and recognizing lessons learned even in cannabis around, you know, later focus on social equity type of impacts. And so look forward to having more discussion on that.
All right, I know we are at time, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to turn it back to Dominique. If you have additional comments that you want to make sure we're aware of, please email those directly to me. I'll drop my email in the chat one more time, but really appreciate everyone's participation today.
Hey, thank you, and apologies, yeah, for the hands that are up, that we are just trying to stick to time here. We're already a bit over, but we will be having more conversations and hope that you will continue to engage, because we want to keep hearing from you and appreciate all the insights we've gained just in this short session. So thank you all for your engagement in this first phase of listening sessions that we had announced. We had 5 initially announced. There's a lot more work for us to do over, so over the month of October, we will be digesting the information that we've received so far. We are going to be planning for the next round of listening sessions, which we expect to start back up in November and take place. We're targeting like every other week. We're exploring these sessions lasting 90 minutes or 2 hours, just to allow for more time to hear from folks as well. And also want to explore offering an in-person ability to join the meeting, in addition to maintaining our virtual option as well. In addition to the topics that we've initiated sessions to cover, we are also exploring adjusting those session topics to include things that we heard here today, but also data collection. Inventory tracking is another area we need to dive into further and understand sort of the range of options that are operable for these operations. Package and labeling expectations, business and licensing considerations. There are some touch points on that today. And of course, we will be coordinating with Sam Barami and the DORA team to ensure that our sessions do not conflict with the Natural Medicine Advisory Board meetings that DORA facilitates. Again, we really appreciate all of your feedback today, the active discussion. Look forward to having you be a part of our future sessions. Again, if you're not signed up to receive updates, please go to the Natural Medicine Division within the Department of Revenue. There's a place for you to sign up and get those updates so that you're getting, what we're working on next and when our next round of listening sessions will be held. Thank you again for your engagement, and we look forward to engaging with you more as we continue our work. Have a great
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Hank.
you.
Thanks, everyone.